My name is Rossie Hutchinson, and I'm a modern quilter who loves to play around with blocks of all types. Today I'm going to talk about the log cabin block. This is a traditional block that I think almost every quilter has made at least one log cabin quilt during their quilting lifetime. And I myself have made many. The reason being it's just open to endless iterations and play. With any established block, I think it's worth making the block as it was traditionally made in order to really explore what the components are, where you can maybe deviate or improvise, do things a little bit differently. So I'm going to demonstrate just how to make a traditional block as a launching off point for our conversation today. So the log cabin block traditionally has a red square at the center representing the warmth of the home, and then around it the stripes are built out. Those logs are built out from there. So I'm going to start with my red center and then my log, attach my first log. So if you see this block written different patterns will tell you different things about which log goes on first. I like to put it on the top first. So it's a traditional block, so we'll use the 1/4 inch seam and attach. And then it is a bit pesky in that you have to press after each seam. So here we'll just set that seam. And with log cabins, I always press out from the center. Otherwise, you're going to have some interesting stacking. So we did on top, first of all, and then we start going around counterclockwise. You can pre-cut all your pieces. You'll know the lengths ahead of time. So we go 1, 2. So these pieces are both white. And again, setting the seam and then pressing outwards. Now, log cabins go wrong if you get that scant 1/4 seam incorrectly, so make sure that is accurate for you. So with the traditional one, we do 2 sides in one color, and then we switch colors for our 3rd and 4th sides. So I'm going to do some light blue here. Our 3rd side, so this will be the bottom. And our 4th side is similarly a light blue. And just line that up and stitch it down. So there we go. We've begun our log cabin block. Now you'll continue to go around and around with your logs, but always start on the top. So if you lose your place, you're not sure, you look at your block and you're like, which was the top? Look for that center and look for that smallest little piece that's going. So you'll keep going around. So here's a finished block that I made, the traditional one, with the light on one side and the slightly darker on the other side. So in making it the traditional way, I've learned that that 1st and 2nd side are shorter than that 3rd and 4th side. There's no way to cut this side evenly. So we're always going to have half that fabric is taking up a little bit more space. That side is a little bit heavier. And we've chosen to do the dark over here. Also worked on piecing. We've learned a bit about making it. So a simple iteration is to just switch out a single stripe for slightly different colors. So here I've taken the light blue, and on the 2nd round I've made a dark blue instead, and on the 2nd round up here the white is instead this lovely tan color. So this is just one slight variation, and as you can see it looks so different than this one, and we can keep playing with those changes. So I've brought for you today a bunch of different log cabin quilts to consider. This one is in many ways traditional. It has that red center that's traditional, the red warmth of home. I made this quilt when my family went on lockdown during quarantine for COVID-19, and I wanted to really think about the warmth of home, focus on the positive aspects of being stuck at home. And so that's where the red center came in, of course, but also the fabrics around it were chosen to tell stories about what was happening with my small family at that time. We live on 10 acres of land. It was springtime. Trees tend to come down around our house at that time. And so my husband was often out with the chainsaw, trimming things up, preventing things from falling down. So here we have a tree stump fabric chosen to kind of help me remember that moment. And then also my son, who's only 2, when my husband would get one down, my son would yell, "I did it!" So it's just, it really cements that memory for me, and that happened at that time. It's paired with this kind of islandy fabric, and that's just to remember we're playing a Pathfinder game that's set in Polynesia. At the same time that I was making this quilt, my friend Dory Blaisdell was making this quilt. So we would be talking via Instagram, via text, both be working on our log cabin quilts. So she's similarly keeping that red center, that happy thoughts of home, and she's going a more traditional route with her color placement. So you can see the ways in which her quilt resembles this one. What she's chosen is, on the light side, every other stripe is this white and navy fabric. And on the dark side, in every block, every other stripe is this gray with navy. And the rest, it's paired in with different scraps. Not, I believe, chosen to be particularly meaningful, but to get the design. One thing that's interesting to note about Dory's quilt is that she's rotated the blocks differently in order to make a secondary design of this big diamond in the middle and this lighter on the outside. So having completed this quilt and seeing Dory's, I was excited to keep playing with the log cabin design. This is something that happens to a lot of people. Once you start making log cabins, it's hard to stop. So the quilt behind me was what I made next. Now the quilt behind me, you'll notice the centers are not red. That's because the primary thing I wanted to do with that quilt is think about the secondary design made by the log cabin quilt. In the center, the blocks are half a dark fabric with a medium fabric, and then the other piece of it is a medium fabric with a white or light fabric. The next blocks out are still log cabin. They are entirely pieced, but on the outside, that negative space is created by using only white on that outside. So it's similar to this, right? This is what's happening on the outside of those, but this is striped with white here to create that secondary effect. So much fun to keep going and going with these log cabins. You can turn them, twist them, do all kinds of different things. One thing to notice about my quilt here is the dark side on each is that side that takes up more space. So as you pivot it, it looks a little bit different. It also contains some prints. So when you're working with your prints inside your log cabin quilt, if they have a one way, like an up and a down, like you'll see this one does with the bird, and you want to keep it upright, you have to think about that ahead of time before you're cutting. Solids are nice in that you don't have to worry about that. Of course, improvisational quilters love to play with the log cabin. So here's an improv log cabin that I made. And with improv, of course, we're prepared to throw at any and all rules. So this has a print in the center. Some of these blocks have actually a mini piece of patchwork as the center of the log cabin. And then they more or less do what we did when piecing the traditional, where you add to the top and go around, but not always. Here's one where I went very small, and you can see here what I'm saying about it's unclear which is the center. It might be a piece of patchwork. And in some places I've added to one side twice before going under. It still is called a log cabin and is a lot of fun to play with in that aspect. So hopefully we've reviewed enough of these fun iterations of log cabins, something I think a lot of us have been making this year and will continue to make going through time. Just keep thinking about what's your placement. Will you keep that red center? What will your color story be? Are you going to play with value a little differently? Do you like the striped look, or would you like a more solid look? There's really a lot of openness to it. And I think studying the traditional elements and then starting to play and just keep playing, just keep making is what makes this block just timeless and almost addictive for a lot of people, that they just keep making their log cabin quilts.